Scotland loses a pub almost every 3 days, double the closure rate of England. 76 were shut for good in just 9 months. If supermarkets or changing drinking habits were the killers, why are England's pubs surviving while Scotland's are vanishing? The official story blames modern life, but the numbers reveal a crisis unique to Scotland. Could geography, not culture, seal the fate of these communities? In the first 9 months of 2023, Scotland saw 76 pubs close their doors for good. That is 1.7% of all pubs in the country, according to the Scottish Beer and Pub Association. Over the same period, England's closure rate was 0.75%. On the same island, under the same economic pressures, Scotland is losing pubs at more than double the pace of its southern neighbour. The British Beer and Pub Association confirms the pattern. Closures across the United Kingdom are rising, but Scotland's rate stands out. Trade bodies have called this a record wave of permanent closures. These are not temporary shutdowns or seasonal dips. They are final. The numbers are stark, and the difference is too large to ignore. England's pubs are struggling, but Scotland's are vanishing twice as fast. The scale of loss raises a deeper question. Why is the gap so wide when the challenges facing pubs are supposed to be the same across the country? The data points to a crisis that is not just about changing habits or rising costs, but something that sets Scotland apart. Rural Scotland stands out on any map of pub closures. The hardest-hit areas are not the cities or commuter belts, but the scattered villages and remote glens. Some Highland regions have seen up to 40% of their pubs disappear in just a few years. This pattern runs against the usual suspects. Supermarkets and cheap off-sales are blamed across the UK, yet urban pubs, supposedly most exposed to supermarket competition, are holding on better than their rural counterparts. In the countryside, each closure leaves a wider gap. Urban centres like Glasgow and Edinburgh still support dozens of pubs per square mile, while entire stretches of the Highlands are left with none at all. The difference is not just about habits or price wars. It is about space, the sheer distances between people, the isolation of small communities, and the impossibility of drawing enough regulars to keep the doors open. Where an English village pub might count on a steady flow of foot traffic and neighbours, a Highland inn faces empty roads and long, dark miles. The crisis is mapped not just in numbers, but in the emptiness left behind when the last pub for 20 miles turns off its lights. The numbers behind Scotland's pub crisis are unforgiving. In the Highlands, population density drops to just 8 or 9 people per square kilometre. England, by contrast, packs 420 people into the same space. This difference is not just academic, it is the arithmetic that decides whether a pub can survive. Industry estimates suggest a rural pub needs a catchment of at least 500 to 1,000 people within a 2-mile radius to break even. In much of rural Scotland, entire villages rarely reach 200 residents, and the surrounding area might only add another 100. For a pub in a Highland village, the customer pool is so small that the math becomes impossible. Consider a typical scenario: a rural Scottish pub with a total catchment of 250 adults. If half of them are regulars, that is about 125 people. To cover wages, stock, utilities, insurance and debt, the business might need to bring in £20,000 to £25,000 each month. Spread across those 125 regulars, every person would need to spend around £165 per month, far more than most can afford and far above what is realistic for any community. Compare this to a village in rural England, where 800 residents live within walking distance, and the catchment can easily top 1,000. The same monthly costs, divided among a much larger group, drop the required spend per person to a level that is actually feasible. In England, the numbers at least give pubs a fighting chance. In Scotland's Highlands, they stack the deck from the start. The contrast is not just about overall population, but about how people are spread across the land. English villages cluster together, often just 2 or 3 miles apart. In Scotland, settlements can be 10, 20, even 30 miles apart, with nothing but empty glens in between. That means a single pub cannot draw from multiple communities, and there is no steady flow of passing trade. The catchment is fixed, the customer base is tiny, and the costs do not shrink to match. This arithmetic explains why even the most beloved Scottish rural pubs find themselves on the brink. The closure rate was 1.7% over 9 months, more than double England's, and that reflects the cold logic of these numbers. Geography does not just make it hard to run a pub, in many places it makes it mathematically impossible. Scotland's pub crisis deepens with every mile between its scattered villages. In much of rural England, a pub might draw customers from 2 or 3 nearby communities, each just a short drive or even a brisk walk apart. In the Highlands, those distances stretch to 10, 20, even 30 miles of winding road. For many, the only way to reach the local is by car. That difference in distance changes everything. On December the 5th, 2014, Scotland lowered its legal blood alcohol limit for drivers from 80 milligrams to 50 milligrams. England kept the higher threshold. The difference sounds technical, but in practice it means a single pint can now push a driver over the limit in Scotland, while the same drink would be legal just across the border. The new limit rewrote the rules of rural life. Trade surveys from the Scottish Licensed Trade Association captured the fallout. About half of all pubs reported a drop in alcohol sales after the law changed, with rural and remote venues feeling the brunt. The timing was immediate. Tina Gibbons, who runs the Bancar Hotel in Aberdeenshire, saw weekday regulars vanish almost overnight. Drivers used to stop off on their way home from work, but that does not happen at all now. The after-work pint, once a staple of rural trade, became a risk not worth taking. For pubs like hers, the new limit did not just mean fewer drinks sold, it meant the loss of a whole category of customer. The commuter passing through, the farm worker finishing late, the neighbour from 2 villages over. Willie MacLeod of British Hospitality Scotland put it plainly. The biggest impact has been on pubs in rural areas. In dense English towns, stricter drink-drive rules might nudge people toward taxis or buses. In the Highlands, there are no alternatives. The bus is a memory, the taxi a rare luxury. The law, meant to save lives, instead turned geography into a commercial dead end. The further a pub sits from its customers, the more the 50 milligram limit bites. For many, the choice is simple: stay home or risk your license on a lonely drive through dark, empty roads. The result is felt in the till, and in the silence where laughter used to carry across the bar. Scotland's geography set the trap, but policy snapped it shut. Rain shapes daily life in Scotland's Western Highlands. Annual rainfall here regularly tops 4,500 millimeters, more than 5 times what much of southern England sees. It is not just a matter of wet afternoons. In places like Lochaber and Skye, rain falls so often that the ground rarely dries, and the air itself seems heavy with water. Even Glasgow, the country's largest city, records over 170 days of rain each year, more than any other major city in the UK. But in the Highlands, the numbers climb higher still. For months on end, evenings mean darkness by 4 o'clock, with the sun vanishing behind hills and clouds before most people have finished work. Winter brings another challenge. At these northern latitudes, daylight shrinks to just a few hours, and by late afternoon the journey to the pub becomes a decision weighed against black ice, howling wind, and the glare of headlights on rain-slicked tarmac. For many, the only way to reach a local is by car, but the roads themselves are an obstacle. The Highlands and Islands contain more than 2,500 miles of single-track roads, narrow lanes with passing places, twisting between lochs and over moors. 10 miles on these roads can take half an hour, especially in winter, when you might meet a herd of sheep, a fallen branch, or a sudden patch of fog. A round trip to the pub becomes an expedition, not an evening stroll. In rural England, a village pub might sit at the end of a 5-minute drive or a 20-minute walk, with streetlights marking the way and buses running late into the evening. In Scotland's Highlands, the nearest neighbour could be miles away, and the next settlement even farther. A night out means planning for the weather, the dark, and the long, slow drive home. For older residents, or anyone without a car, The barriers are even higher. Social isolation grows with every mile of empty road and every storm that sweeps through the glen. The physical hardship of reaching a pub in these conditions is not an occasional inconvenience, it is a constant deterrent. When the rain never lets up, when the roads are narrow and slow, and when darkness falls before dinner, the idea of popping out for a pint loses its appeal. The journey itself becomes a reason to stay home, no matter how strong the pull of community or tradition. This is the daily reality that shapes the fate of Scotland's rural pubs, compounding the arithmetic of distance and population with the relentless pressure of the land and sky. The financial hole facing Scotland's rural pubs runs deeper than empty bar stools. Every pint poured in a Highland pub carries hidden costs that would stagger most urban landlords. Delivery trucks travel 50 to 100 miles to reach a single outpost, burning hours and fuel on single-track roads. Where an English pub might pay a modest fee for a weekly drop of 10 kegs, the same order in rural Scotland comes with a delivery charge up to 5 times higher. Each keg must cover not just the price of beer, but the cost of getting it across mountains, ferries, and moorland. Breakdowns do not wait for a quiet day. When the cellar cooling fails or the tills freeze, the nearest engineer could be hours away. Rural pubs pay call-out fees starting at £200 just for someone to show up before a single part is replaced or a repair is made. Routine maintenance, from refrigeration to fire alarms, runs 2 to 3 times the cost of an urban bar. These are fixed costs that never shrink, no matter how few customers walk through the door. A Highland engineer, familiar with the lonely miles between jobs, describes his week as a circuit of empty car parks and shuttered windows. He might drive 70 miles to a pub where the landlord is waiting, anxious about the bill as much as the broken pump. The journey is long, the work is the same, but the economics are upside down. The farther he travels, the less likely the pub is to survive the next winter. Behind the bar, the faces are changing or disappearing. More than a quarter of remote rural Scots are over 65, and in some hamlets, half the residents are pensioners. The Tuesday card game that once filled the snug now draws only a handful of regulars. As the population ages, the pool of working-age customers shrinks, and with it, the steady trade that keeps a pub afloat. Young people leave for the cities, chasing jobs and opportunities the Glen cannot offer. Those who remain grow older, and when regulars stop coming, there is no one left to take their place. The result is a business model stretched to breaking point, higher costs at every turn, a shrinking and aging customer base, and no prospect of relief. For many rural publicans, every month is a battle to cover bills that outpace their takings, with no way to pass the burden on. The numbers do not just look bad on paper, they play out in the empty spaces where laughter and conversation used to echo. In villages where the last pub flickers on the edge of closure, hope often arrives in the form of a community buyout. Across Scotland, locals gather in church halls and living rooms, determined not to lose the one place that still brings everyone together. The idea is simple: raise the money, buy the building, and run it as a community asset. But the reality is far harsher than the dream. Community organizers describe the first meetings, packed rooms, pledges of support, volunteers ready to pour pints and scrub floors. Fundraising begins with bake sales and charity auctions, local businesses chipping in what they can. The Scottish Land Fund and the Plunkett Foundation offer guidance, and for a handful of pubs the campaign reaches its goal. The Old Forge in Knoydart and the Anchor Tavern on Benbecula are the rare success stories, celebrated in the press as proof that a determined village can defy the odds. But for every success like Knoydart, there are many more that end quietly. The numbers are relentless. A Highland village with 150 people can raise only so much, and the costs keep rising: purchase price, repairs, insurance, staff, stock, and the first winter's fuel bill. Even if the community manages to buy the pub, the struggle has just begun. The customer base remains tiny, the catchment unchanged, and the bills are indifferent to good intentions. Volunteers burn out, fundraising stalls, and the committee faces the same arithmetic that closed the pub in the first place. Advisors who work with rural Scottish communities say most rescue attempts never reach the point of purchase. The enthusiasm is there, but the math is impossible. Only a small fraction of community pub campaigns ever serve a single pint. The rest falter under the weight of distance, demography, and the hard economics of remoteness. In some cases, the project collapses in a final meeting, funds short, owner unwilling to wait, committee members exhausted by the grind. The pub doors stay shut, and the village loses more than a business. It loses its welcome, its gathering place, its sense of possibility. There is no shame in these failures. The truth is that the odds were stacked from the start. When a community pub survives in the Highlands, it is the exception that proves the rule. The overwhelming majority of attempts, more than 9 out of 10, never make it past the starting line. Not because people did not care, but because the numbers never worked. The loss is not just economic, it is the slow fading of a community's heart, a verdict written not by culture or effort, but by the land. Today, Scotland's pub closures outpace England's by more than double, driven not by culture but by cold arithmetic, distance, demography, and geography. As rural communities shrink and isolation deepens, the local pub's disappearance signals more than lost pints. It marks fading connection. The question now isn't how to save the past, but whether we will let geography decide the future of community itself. Share your thoughts below.